Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. I am so excited for this one.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be tackling agile testing,
Okay.
which I have to admit I'm already like feeling a little overwhelmed by just how much is out there. You
Yeah.
know, there's like articles and blog posts and frameworks and all sorts of things.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's enough to make your head spin. But
Mm.
but don't worry, you're in good hands because our guide for this deep dive is going to be the book Agile Testing.
Oh, okay. Classic.
Yeah, by Lisa Crispin and Janet Gregory.
Yeah.
And this book is seriously like the Agile testing Bible.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It's considered like a foundational
I
text.
mean, it's been praised by everybody, from
Yeah.
Mary Poppendieck to Uncle Bob Martin.
Yeah. And the reason it really resonates with so many people, I think, is because it goes beyond just the mechanics of testing.
Hmm.
It digs into the cultural and mindset shift that's needed to like truly embrace agile testing.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. That's kind of what I'm most curious about. I mean, I
Yeah.
worked on teams that say they're agile,
Right.
but testing always seems to get squeezed in at the end, like an afterthought.
Yeah. Yeah.
It ends up feeling like, like a mini waterfall trapped in a sprint.
Right. The infamous mini waterfall trap.
How do we avoid that?
Yeah, well, the book actually, it has this great analogy. They talk about baking in quality.
Oh, okay.
So it's about, making quality a core ingredient from the get-go, not something you try to like sprinkle on top at the last minute.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do you actually bake it in?
Well,
Especially when like requirements are constantly changing and you're working on tight deadlines.
yeah, that's where the true value of agile testing, I think, really shines. It's about integrating testing into every single stage of the development cycle,
Okay.
from planning to coding to release.
Oh, wow.
And it requires the entire team to be involved, not just a dedicated testing team working in isolation.
So it's not about throwing code over the wall to a QA department and hoping for the best.
Definitely not. It's about fostering true collaboration where testers, developers, and product owners are all working together, sharing responsibility for quality.
That's a really interesting idea. So, Crispin and Gregory, they lay out 10 principles for agile testers.
Right.
What really stood out to you? Like, which ones have you found most helpful in your own work?
Well, the one that always comes to mind is responding to change.
Oh, yeah.
Agile development is inherently dynamic,
Right.
and requirements can shift rapidly, so testers need to be flexible, adaptable, and able to adjust their testing strategies on the fly.
Hmm.
This reminds me of a project where we actually had to completely revamp our testing approach midway through
Wow.
due to a major shift in the product roadmap.
Oh, that sounds pretty intense. What did you do?
Well, we had to get creative. We started incorporating more exploratory testing, working closely with the developers to understand like the evolving architecture, and we focused on building automated tests for the most critical functionalities.
That's really interesting. That actually leads me to another principle from the book that really resonated with me. Um, Continuous improvement.
Right.
It seems like agile testers are constantly seeking ways to refine their processes, their tools, and even their own skills.
Mm,
It's like they had to be lifelong learners, always pushing themselves to get better.
that's spot on. One way to facilitate that continuous improvement is through the power of three rule that Lisa Crispin's team implemented. It mandates that any discussion about a feature includes a programmer, a tester, and the product owner.
Oh, that's interesting. I never heard of that rule before.
Huh.
Can you elaborate on how that helps with continuous improvement?
Well, it ensures that testers aren't just passively receiving information or instructions. They're active participants in the conversation, bringing their unique perspective to the table and influencing decisions from the outset. This continuous collaboration and, this diverse input from different roles fosters a culture of constant evaluation and improvement.
It sounds like a great way to break down silos and make sure everyone's on the same page. Okay, I'm starting to see how these principles can really help teams embrace agile testing. But I'm also curious about the challenges, Like what are some of the biggest hurdles that teams face when transitioning to agile testing? What do they often get wrong?
Well, one of the biggest pitfalls is trying to force fit traditional testing practices into an agile framework.
Right.
That leads to those mini waterfalls you mentioned earlier where testing gets squeezed into the end of the sprint, causing delays and ultimately, compromising quality.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've seen happen. It
Yeah.
feels like you're constantly playing catch up.
Right.
But how do you break free from that pattern?
Well, it requires a fundamental shift in mindset. The book highlights this quality police mentality that can creep in, where testers act like gatekeepers, focus solely on finding defects. It creates a very adversarial dynamic between testers and developers.
So instead of collaboration and shared responsibility,
Mm.
it becomes about pointing fingers and placing blame.
Exactly. In true agile testing, testers and developers are partners working together to prevent defects and build quality into the product from the ground up. And there's a great anecdote in the book where Janet Gregory shares how her perspective changed after she took the time to understand the application from the developer's point of view.
Oh, I'm really curious about that. Can you tell me more?
Yeah, so Janet realized that fixing seemingly minor bugs could sometimes introduce more risk and costs than the perceived benefit. This shift in thinking highlights how crucial it is for testers to understand the technical intricacies of the application and collaborate with developers to determine testing priorities.
Okay, that's fascinating. It emphasizes the importance of empathy and understanding in Agile testing. It's not just about blindly following a test script. It's about making informed decisions based on a deeper understanding of the context. So, how do we practically apply this in our everyday work? How do we avoid falling into these traps and start truly baking in quality?
Well, that's where some of the tools and frameworks come into play. One of the most helpful models for understanding different types of tests and their purpose is Brian Merrick's Agile testing quadrants.
Okay. Yeah, that's actually one of the things I've been meaning to ask about. I've seen those quadrants mentioned in several articles, but I haven't quite grasped how they actually work in practice.
Yeah, they're a really helpful way to visualize your testing strategy and ensure that you're covering all the bases.
Okay.
So let's dive into each quadrant.
Perfect. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Let's unpack these quadrants.
All right, so let's imagine these quadrants as a map guiding your testing journey.
Okay.
Quadrant 1 focuses on technology-facing tests that support the team. This is where your unit tests and component tests live.
So this is where we're making sure that the nuts and bolts of the code are functioning correctly.
Exactly.
Kind of like checking the engine of a car before hitting the road.
You got it. You want to make sure those individual components are working as expected before you start putting them all together.
Right. Okay.
Then Quadrant 2 shifts our focus to business-facing tests, but still supporting the team. Here we're talking about examples, story tests, prototypes, things that help us confirm the software is aligned with the customer's needs and expectations.
Okay, so it sounds like quadrant 2 kind of bridges the gap between the technical details and the big picture goals,
Yeah.
making sure we're not just building the thing right, but building the right thing.
Right.
How does that play out in a real-world scenario?
So imagine you're developing a mobile banking app.
Okay.
In Quadrant 1, you'd have unit tests checking the algorithms for calculating interest or validating account numbers.
Right.
But in Quadrant 2, you might use story tests to simulate a user depositing a check via their phone's camera, verifying that the transaction flows correctly through the system.
Okay, that's a great example. So are quadrants 3 and 4 where we start involving actual users in the testing process?
Not quite. Quadrant 3 is still about business-facing tests, but now we're critiquing the product. Think exploratory testing, usability testing, user acceptance testing. These tests give us feedback on how the product functions from the user's perspective.
Okay, so we're evaluating the user experience, making sure it's intuitive and meets their expectations.
Exactly.
Okay, I can see how that's crucial. But where does automation fit into all of this? It seems like it would be tricky to automate some of these higher-level tests, especially those focused on user experience.
That's a great point. Automation is a crucial tool in Agile testing, but it's not a silver bullet. You're right. Certain aspects of testing, like exploratory testing, require human intuition and creativity. However, we can strategically leverage automation to streamline our testing efforts. The book highlights the test automation pyramid, which guides us in prioritizing which tests to automate and at what level.
The test automation pyramid. That's another concept I keep encountering, but haven't fully grasped. Can you break it down for me?
Absolutely. Imagine a pyramid with 3 levels. At a base, you have unit tests, which are the fastest and easiest to automate. As you move up the pyramid, you have fewer tests at the service or API level and even fewer at the UI level.
So it's about striking a balance between the speed and efficiency of lower-level automated tests with the need for higher-level tests that validate user workflows and the overall user experience.
Precisely. The pyramid guides us to automate as much as possible at the lower levels, providing a safety net for refactoring and catching bugs early on. This frees up our human testers to focus on those critical aspects that require human judgment and interaction.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's talk about quadrant 4. What kind of tests fall under this category?
Quadrant 4 encompasses technology-facing tests that critique the product. These tests focus on non-functional aspects like performance, security, and load testing. For example, we might run tests to see how the system handles a large number of concurrent users or how it responds to various security threats.
Those sound incredibly important, especially in today's world where security breaches and performance issues can have huge consequences. What are some tools and techniques that Agile teams use for these types of tests?
There's a whole ecosystem of tools out there.
Yeah, I bet.
For performance testing, you have tools like JMeter and LoadRunner that simulate heavy user traffic. For security testing, there are tools that scan for vulnerabilities and penetration testing tools that try to exploit those weaknesses. And the book highlights some really interesting examples of how teams have gotten creative with automation. Lisa Crispin's team used Ruby with Water to create a domain-specific language that allowed manual testers to write high-level automated scripts.
Oh, wow, that's impressive. It sounds like Agile testing requires a deep understanding of not only testing principles, but also programming and scripting.
It certainly helps to have those skills in your toolbox.
Yeah.
But remember, agile testing is a team sport. It's about leveraging everyone's strengths.
Right. Speaking of teams, one of the things that struck me about the book was its emphasis on the human element of Agile testing. It's not just about tools and processes, it's about fostering a collaborative and supportive culture. How important is that human element in your experience?
Oh, it's absolutely crucial. Agile testing thrives on open communication, trust, and psychological safety. Teams need to feel comfortable sharing ideas, asking questions, and even admitting mistakes.
Yeah, that makes sense. If people are afraid to speak up or take risks, they're less likely to innovate or come up with creative solutions.
Right.
And that can stifle continuous improvement, right?
Exactly. And remember, the book emphasizes that the whole team is responsible for quality. It's not just the tester's job. Developers need to write testable code. Product owners need to be involved in defining acceptance criteria. And everyone needs to be committed to building quality into the product from the ground up.
So it's about breaking down those traditional silos between developers, testers, and the business side and working together as a unified team.
You got it. When everyone feels empowered to contribute to quality, that's when the magic happens. And one way to facilitate that is by involving customers in the testing process as early as possible.
Oh, I can see how that would be beneficial. Getting feedback from actual users throughout the development process can help ensure that you're building the right product and meeting their needs.
Absolutely. And the book shares some really interesting examples of how teams have successfully integrated customers into their testing process. For instance, some teams hold regular showcase sessions where they demonstrate the latest features to customers and gather feedback. Others have even invited customers to participate in their sprint planning meetings.
Oh, that's a great way to foster transparency and build a strong partnership between the development team and the customer. But I'm also curious about the challenges of involving customers. How do you manage expectations and ensure that their feedback is actionable?
That's a valid concern. It's important to establish clear communication channels and guidelines for feedback. For example, you might use a dedicated feedback tool or have a designated point person who gathers and filters customer feedback. And it's crucial to make sure customers understand the iterative nature of agile development and that not every piece of feedback can be implemented immediately.
So it's about setting realistic expectations and finding ways to prioritize and incorporate their feedback effectively.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between being responsive to customer needs and staying focused on your overall product roadmap.
This conversation has really opened my eyes to the complexities of agile testing. It's so much more than just finding bugs. It's a whole culture and mindset that requires collaboration, communication, and a commitment to continuous improvement. But I have to admit, I'm still a little intimidated by the prospect of implementing all of this in my own work. Where do I even begin?
That's a great question. One of the most valuable takeaways from the book is that agile testing is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about taking small steps, experimenting, learning from your mistakes, and constantly iterating. Don't try to do everything at once. Start by identifying a few key areas where you can make improvements and gradually expand your efforts from there.
So it's about taking a pragmatic approach and not getting overwhelmed by trying to implement everything perfectly from day one.
Exactly. And remember, the book provides a wealth of practical advice and examples that you can draw inspiration from. It's a great resource to have on hand as you embark on your agile testing journey.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm feeling much more equipped to tackle agile testing now, but I know there's still so much more to uncover. Are we ready to dive into the final part of this deep dive?
You know, as we've been talking about all these different facets of Agile testing, one thing that keeps popping into my head is the question of metrics.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do we actually measure the effectiveness of our Agile testing efforts?
Right.
You can't just be about counting bugs, right?
Yeah, you're hitting on a crucial point.
Yeah.
Simply counting bugs doesn't give you the full picture.
Yeah.
Agile teams focus on metrics that provide insights into the overall health and quality of the software and the development process.
So what kind of metrics are we talking about? Give me some examples.
We'll think about things like cycle time, how long it takes for a feature to move from idea to implementation.
Or lead time, the time it takes from a customer request to delivery.
Right.
And of course, we want to keep an eye on escape defects, bugs that make it all the way to production.
Oh, yeah.
But even with escape defects, it's not just about the number. It's about understanding the root cause and learning from those mistakes.
Right. So those metrics sound much more focused on understanding the flow of work and identifying bottlenecks or areas for improvement rather than just pointing fingers.
Exactly. Agile metrics are all about continuous improvement, not about assigning blame or punishing individuals.
Oh,
They're tools to help us get better both individually and as a team.
speaking of improvement, I remember the book talked about technical debt.
Right.
I'm still a little fuzzy on what that actually means in practice.
Think of technical debt like financial debt.
Okay.
If you make quick and dirty fixes or take shortcuts during development, you're essentially borrowing time and resources from the future.
Because those shortcuts will eventually come back to bite you.
Exactly.
Okay.
It might manifest as poorly written code, lack of documentation, or inadequate testing.
Right.
Over time, this debt accumulates and makes it increasingly difficult to maintain and evolve the software. You end up spending more time fixing bugs and less time building new features.
So it's like that saying, pay me now or pay me later, but with code.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And Agile testing helps us manage this technical debt by emphasizing practices like refactoring, which is all about cleaning up the code base and making it more maintainable.
And having a solid suite of automated tests gives you that safety net to refactor without fear of breaking things right.
Precisely. Automated tests give you the confidence to make changes knowing that you have a way to quickly catch any regressions.
Okay.
It's like having a safety harness when you're rock climbing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears a bit, the book also highlights the importance of the tester's mindset in Agile development.
Right.
What are some key characteristics of an effective Agile tester? What makes them stand out?
Well, an effective Agile tester is a master collaborator. Okay. They're comfortable working closely with developers, product owners, and even customers. They're also skilled communicators, able to clearly articulate their findings and advocate for quality without being confrontational.
So they're kind of like diplomats in the world of software development.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
They need to be able to navigate complex relationships and build consensus around quality, and they can't be afraid to ask tough questions and challenge assumptions. The book talks about the importance of testers asking powerful questions.
What makes a question powerful in the context of Agile testing?
It's about asking questions that go beyond the obvious and dig deeper into the why behind things.
Okay.
For example, instead of just asking, does this feature work? A powerful question might be, what are the potential risks if this feature fails? Or how will users actually interact with this feature in their daily workflow?
Right.
These kinds of questions help uncover hidden assumptions and lead to a more thorough understanding of the software and the user's needs.
So it's about being curious and challenging the status quo, not just blindly following a script.
Exactly.
And that ties back to the principle of continuous feedback, right?
Absolutely. Agile teams thrive on feedback.
Right.
It's what allows them to learn, adapt, and continuously improve. They use a variety of techniques to facilitate this constant flow of feedback, like daily stand-up meetings, frequent demos, and close collaboration between testers and developers.
It sounds like it's all about creating a culture of transparency and open communication, where feedback is welcomed and acted upon rather than being seen as criticism.
You hit the nail on the head. Agile teams embrace feedback because they understand that it's essential for growth and improvement. And this ties into another key Agile principle, whole team responsibility for quality.
Right.
It's not just the tester's job. Everyone has a role to play.
Right. Developers need to write testable code. Product owners need to provide clear acceptance criteria, and everyone needs to be actively looking for ways to improve the process.
Exactly. It's a shared commitment to quality that permeates the entire team. And that's really the heart of Agile testing.
Yeah.
It's not just about finding bugs. It's about creating a culture of quality and continuous improvement that permeates every aspect of the software development process.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener. I'm walking away with a much deeper understanding of Agile testing and what it truly means to bake in quality. What final thought or provocative question would you leave our listeners with as they continue on their Agile testing journeys?
Here's a thought to ponder. We've been talking about agile testing in the context of software development, but what if we apply these principles to other areas of our lives?
Oh,
Could we use an agile mindset to improve our personal productivity, our relationships, or even our approach to learning new skills?
that's a brilliant question. It challenges us to think beyond the traditional boundaries of Agile testing and consider its broader applicability.
I love it. I encourage our listeners to share their thoughts and reflections on the show's social media channels. We're always eager to hear your perspectives and continue the conversation.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Agile testing. We hope you found it valuable and insightful. Until next time, happy testing.